everyone. I'm Preeti Ars, the Literary Festival Director for the Indo-American Arts Council, a not-for-profit located in New York City. Welcome to the 2022 edition of our Literary Festival. IAAC is dedicated to celebrating and showcasing the arts in North America. The Literary Festival is in its 8th edition and showcases writers who bring stories of the Indian experience to the world. The festival runs from November 7th through the 13th, with virtual sessions taking place November 7th through the 11th, and in-person events on November 12th and 13th at the Kalem Galleries in New York City. The series of online events are hosted on IAAC's Facebook and YouTube channels each night from November 7th to the 11th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The full schedule with dates, times, and authors is available on our website, iaac.us. We hope that you enjoy hearing from these authors, and thank you again for your interest and support.
Good evening. My name is Arishi Ray, and I'm the Director of Youth Programs at the Indo-American Arts Council. We want to thank you for joining us today and welcome you to this evening's Children Literature panel discussion. We are very excited to share with you the works and insights from these esteemed authors. This evening, you will hear conversation discussion from 3 authors and illustrators focused on children's Indian literature. First, we have Hannah Lalanpui, author of When Blackbirds Fly. Hannah is a PhD research scholar from the Mizoram University. Her areas of interest lies in post-colonial studies, trauma writing, and children's literature. Next, we have joining us Samina Mishra, author of Jamla Walks. Samina is a documentary filmmaker, writer, and teacher based in New Delhi, with a special interest in media for and about children. She also runs the Magic Key Center for the Arts and Childhood. And last but not least, we have Kripa, illustrator of Somnath Horror's Wounds. Kripa is a children's book illustrator based in Mumbai. She took up teaching art and design after completing fine art from the Sir J.J. School of Art. Her art is rooted in her engagement with the city of Mumbai, its children, people, and their everyday challenges. This panel is being moderated by Arpita Nath, Associate Commissioning Editor for the Penguin Random House India. We hope that you enjoy the panel discussion today, and thank you again for joining us.
Hi everyone, thrilled to be hosting this panel today for the IAAC Lit Fest, featuring 3 very important books. Books that I think everyone should read irrespective of their age. Before I get started on the questions, I just want to talk a little about my own reading experience. What was so interesting to me while reading these books was that although there are different topics and events that takes place in the books, but there is an underlying theme that kind of came out while I was reading them. Samina's book Jamlo Walks is about the migrant crisis, the exodus during the lockdown, and then we move on to Hannah's book, which talks about the bombings in Mizoram in the 1960s, and then we then explore Somnath Horror's works and his life through Wounds, which was illustrated by Kripa. But all of these books talk about pain, suffering, they talk about conflict, about violence and how children live through the realities of the catastrophes. One thing that, kept on hitting me while I was just reading these books, especially Hannah's, was, this quote by the writer Deborah Ellis, who says that, if children are old enough to be bombed, they are old enough to read about it. So with that, I think we'll start our discussion on talking about difficult subjects. We'll start with a question that will be for everyone, but I will want to start with Samina first about what was the intent and motivation, behind Jamlo Walks, and why did you choose this particular age group?
I wrote the story not really keeping in mind a particular age group. I wrote the story that, I wanted to. The intention, I guess, is I think literature holds a mirror up to society. And so, we were, as writers, when events take place, sometimes that those become the prompts for us to say something. And for me, at that time, during the first lockdown, when we saw not just the way that the migrants were being treated, but even those who stayed behind in the cities, working class populations, and how they were being treated. And suddenly it had become a crime to sort of be out, when there was no other support for them to be able to sort of, without having to earn a livelihood, how were they meant to support themselves? So suddenly this, the distinction between groups in society, in our society, which is not, it's not a new thing. It's not that the pandemic suddenly created that. It is forces at play for a very long time. But the pandemic just kind of brought the ugliness all to the fore. And for me, the intention was just that, how are children going to process this, and are we going to forget about it when it's all over? And will children who have not, everybody suffered in the pandemic, but there were different kinds of suffering. And for those who didn't suffer like Jamlo did, would they forget? Would they even have some understanding of what it meant to belong to a group that suffered in that kind of way? So I just wrote the story, and then it took the shape that it took over the entire process, while talking to my editor Smith, and then when they brought in Tariq. So it grew into the form that it did over the process.
Right. I think another book was conceived during the pandemic. Kripa, do you want to talk about why did you choose, Shomnath Horse? He's a legend when it comes to, he's a legendary printmaker and known for his, kind of preoccupation with the Bengal famine and, the Tebaga movement. So was it intentional or, was this a coincidence that happened, during the pandemic?
Well, ours was an intentional book also because we celebrated Shomnath Sore's centenary into 2021. So the idea of bringing, and Art First is a publication that looks into creating books for children that introduce children to Indian art and artists. Through art and artists, we are talking about subjects that are, also pertinent to what happened in the past and what is happening today, and threading the two has been a conscious effort through these books as well. And we could not think of any better book than, any better artist than Shomnath Hor, because we were also embroiled in 2019. We were embroiled in the farmers' crisis, which went on till 2020 and the early 2021 also. And not simply that, but also we saw, there have been revolts and protests and unrest in the country. This was one artist who had consciously dedicated his life to documenting the suffering of the people. What then also metaphorically transpired out of the book, because the title is Wounds, is that the pain and the suffering that we all, on a humanitarian level we faced during the pandemic, that sort of then, the book that became the language of the book later. As Samina beautifully mentioned, that a book is written at a particular time, and you write it off and you finish illustrating it. But then the shape that the book takes is through the reader, is by the reader, and that changes with every changing epoch. So I create the art, but children create the meaning of, children get the meaning of the art back for me. So, yeah.
Moving on to Hannah. Hannah, this is your debut novel. And it is a very complex book. I mean, I was dreading, turning the pages because I was just, so emotional just reading. Every page had a lot of complexity. There were like deeper meanings of identity, othering. Obviously, there was violence. But why did you choose this topic as for your debut novel?
Yeah, so my book is centered around the bombing of Aizawl in 1966, and um, the sufferings of the incident is what started the 20-year-long insurgency in Mizoram. And I think the bombing and the entire insurgency years is a very muted and very silenced history in the larger national narrative. So and there are it's also a very muted part of the entire discourse surrounding Northeast. So I wanted to use the historical fiction form to highlight the traumatic experiences of people whose stories have been silenced by political narratives, while making it truthful for young readers and also not to be too painful for the victims if they ever come across my book. So I think the main aim of me choosing this incident as a center of my story is to bring a certain sense of historical awareness about marginalized history and the sufferings of the people, and to provide a platform for the victims whose stories have been silenced for so many years. And um, the main reason which prompted me to choose this topic or this incident is because my mother's family is very much affected by the bombing of Aizawl and the insurgency. So, listening to my mother's story about how she grew up during the insurgency kind of motivated me to come up with this story.
Right. So I'm moving on to the next set of questions, a two-part question. I think we can start with Kripa because, visualizing, telling a visual, painting a visual landscape when it comes to conflict, when it comes to violence is very difficult, especially when you're talking to, I think, 7-year-olds, which is the target audience for your book. Uh, so how much do we show? How much do we not show? Where do we draw the line? Is there self-censorship when it comes to, illustrating, books with such complex topics?
Uh, who is, I mean, I always keep this in mind that I actually started off as an artist. I do not think about just illustrating merely the text that is written. And who is art for is is can you childproof art? It's like, can you childproof nature? Yeah, so nature is an open playground, and so is art. Art is an open playground for anybody and everybody. There's no age group for any specific art. You walk into any art gallery and everybody can view art. And so are our books. I don't believe in censoring them at all. The one thing that I keep in mind is that when I'm illustrating for children is that children believe in magic, and many of us adults, we have lost faith. Some of us have lost faith and belief in that magic, and I don't want to take that away from children, and that's the only thing I keep in mind while illustrating. Otherwise, I do not see why a book like Wounds cannot be picked up by a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 50-year-old. It's a book for everyone and anyone.
Coming to the second part, Kripa, was there any kind of criticism you faced after the book was published? What was the feedback like? Because there are multiple gatekeepers, and there are once you start producing books with such diverse topics and on such narratives, there's always someone who has an opinion.
Yeah.
So, what was there any particular incident that kind of you want to talk about?
I think one of the things that we are constantly asked about is why a very a deep subject as wounds, and the book is dark. The book has a lot of black in it. So these are certain questions that always come up in every discussion, and we are happy that these discussions are happening and these dialogues are taking place. And I'm absolutely should be open. I think we are all open to that sort of a critique and criticism. So then that sort of opens up dialogue for as to what books are and who, what should books be, because these are things that shape what we are together as a children's book community today, what we stand for. These are the dialogues that are constantly shaping us and what we should be writing and what we shouldn't be writing and what we should be telling children. And I think these dialogues are very important. And there hasn't been any particular incident as such where somebody has come up to us and said that this is not something that I want to take to my children. We've so far.
That's amazing, actually, because I know there are a lot of, parents, there are a lot of teachers who kind of like, even editing books for children. I think we have to always be very, very conscious of the words that we are putting, the themes that we are putting. It's not like we're censoring anything, but we have to always be mindful, very alert on what kind of goes in. So I'm taking this question to Samina now. Samina, what was the creative process like? Because you're writing also for a very young audience, so.
Yeah. So like I said, I didn't write the story thinking that it would be read just by a very young audience. I wrote it because I felt children must remember. That was my only prompt. I wanted children to remember this time, and I'm glad that it exists because, as you know, already there have been denials in Parliament about what had happened in that first lockdown. So for me, the process actually, it was an extremely challenging process because I just wrote the story, but then this question of what form it should take, yeah. So, my editor Smith, she asked me that, do you want to try to turn it into something bigger? But for me, that was very difficult because we were all stuck in lockdown. And to fictionalize it beyond what I've already done, because the Jamlo in the book is a kind of fictional Jamlo, no? She's a Jamlo that I imagined she was. I couldn't do that because my process is also, it's very important for me to be out in the field, to be able to write. So that was out. And then it became, because it was a short piece of text. So, a picture book form is what we started talking about. And then we really had a lot of debates about this because picture books, although all of us here know that picture books are not just for the young, but that is what the perception is outside. And so this question of, age group and, how it would be marketed. And these are things of the real world that we did think about. And I do think that ideally, this book, when I wrote it and, even as we were working on it, once we had started the process of, visualizing it, I did think that, it is appropriate for a 9+. But as you know, it is, the book is 7+, it says 7+ on it. And I thought, this will be a challenge. And some people did say that, it will be, difficult for. Should we sort of share it with children as young as 7? But the thing that I think we have to remember as adults is that sometimes, we are making assumptions because now that the book has been out and it has been used, and I have also interacted with children with it, I'm constantly being also surprised by that. Library educators have used the book extensively, and they have used it with grade 2, which is 7. I have been at last month at the Neve Literature Festival. When I walked into the reading of the book, and a festival reading, it's a book that requires engagement. I feel that it's a book where once you have read it, with the child, you have to hold some space, you have to allow for questions. And I thought, like a festival reading is not possible to do that. So I was a bit concerned about it. And I asked the children, and there were some really young kids there. And I asked them, are you okay with listening to a story that is, not a happy story? And they said yes. So I said, but why are you okay? I mean, what makes it okay? And I got these two responses. One was that, we have to listen to everybody's stories. And not every story can be a happy story. There are also some stories in the world which are sad stories. So children, because they are living complex lives today, and particularly in the last 2 years, every family has suffered some kind of loss, some kind of struggle. So they know that. And I think that books and literature then they become ways of talking about these things, which can open up stuff that maybe children are thinking about on the inside, but perhaps don't find ways of articulating. So, I feel that I learned, I was a bit uncertain when we were working on it. But I have to say that in the last year, with the book being out there and being used, I'm certainly much surer about, this and the need to put
credit to kids, more credit to children. People think that
yes.
I think they are the worst critics. If they don't like it, they will show it. They
Yeah.
don't care who you are. So
Yeah.
this is one of
No, and also I do think that, there might be those children who look at it and they start sort of reading and then they reject it at some point. And I think that's fine. Children should have the right to, make that choice, and they can stop that. As adults, we can only say we want to share this with you because, I like it, because I think, I want to share with you what I felt when I read it. That's all we can do. And maybe if the child is not ready today, you try again after, some weeks.
Was there a particular reason why you just leave it at that she has collapsed? We don't get to see what happens later, and obviously,
Yeah.
I think the heartbreaking point for me was when we see the mother and the father waiting, and there is just one slipper. I think that kind of ends the book. There is no mention of death or it just kept very open-ended there. So, was there any particular reason why you kept it like that, the ending?
Because sometimes I think we create meaning in multiple ways, and we don't always need words to create that meaning. That spread, I think it maybe not all children will get it, but to go back to my reading at the festival last month, after I finished the reading, so we projected the images. And so after I'd finished the reading, it's the way it ends, there is a kind of silence always in the room. And so I just, on the projection, I went back to that last spread of the second last spread of the chappal, the broken chappal. And I said, if you have questions, I'm here to answer them, but it's okay if you don't want to talk and you don't have questions for me. There is a note at the end of the book and you can go home and you can read it, and there is information there too, because that note actually details what happened. But I left that spread there, and there was a girl who said, she raised her hand and she said, "Why is that chappal broken?" So I asked her, I said, "What do you think? Why is the chappal broken?" And she got it. She said to me, she died. And she was a little uncertain in the way that she said it, but she had understood. So I feel that for me, that lack of, I don't think it's about lack of clarity. I think it's quite clear that something befell Jamlo, even if you as a reader don't understand that she died there. And then you will read the note at the end in any case, and you will understand that. But I think that silent page is a page for you as a reader to just stop and pause and absorb and think about it.
Right. I think one of the best things about, the books is that I think the audience would like to know this, that none of these books are more than 128 pages long. Like I know Kripa's book is around 70 pages, Samina 32 pages, and Hannah's book just 128 pages. So we are not talking about, massive works on, this happened, that happened, and how it impacted people's lives. But it's through, really using like less words, like Hannah's book, when we are talking about, the loss of innocence. One thing, when I was reading, we are talking about children collecting cartridges, and it's a sport because they for them the shooting and all, it's happening, but what they are more concerned about is who has the most cartridges and who's going to win the tally. So I think that was really heartbreaking also, because that these children are living in a space where they shouldn't be. They are put in a place which is of, the adults, they're playing power games and everything, and they're just stuck without any, they didn't want to be there, but that's what it is. So, coming to Hannah, how much do you show, what not to show, what was it like for you? Because I know the part where it starts becoming real in, when blackbirds fly, is when we see two soldiers carrying the bodies of two children on their backs, and that's where it starts becoming really, totally real in the book. So, just talk about your writing process.
Yeah, so while I was writing this book, um, I didn't really have the intention of writing it as a children's book, because that's why I didn't hold back myself from anything. But I'm glad that it's been categorized as a children's reading list, because as Samina has said, I think it's very important to address these issues and bring to light the historical incidents, especially for the children, because I feel that understanding historical incidents, especially the ones that deal with conflict and violence, are important to bridge the generational gap between children and parents, between children and grandparents. And I think serious literature for children needs to be more promoted, because I think we have to train children to face certain realities and um, make them understand the dynamics of society and the world that they live in. I think it's very important to introduce to them these kind of issues at a very early age. And I think oftentimes we tend to underestimate the, children's reading abilities, how much they can comprehend, how much they can understand. So I think writing about conflict and violence for children uh, is also a necessity, as much as it is necessary to introduce them to the fictional world of dragons and magics and those kind of things. So while I was writing this, what I had in mind was um, conflicts and violence, like the insurgency that we had in Mizoram. Children were one of the worst victims, and I think that children today, in the present day, needs to understand that their grandparents and their parents grew up in a world like this when they were in the age with which they grew up. So I think serious themes for children's literature is very much a necessity. And even during the process of my writing, I didn't really hold back or think about how um, how much children could take or how much they would be able to be comprehend. So I think it's just it's all about writing the reality and putting it out there for them.
So was there any, because it is a very, politics does come in very heavily in this book. What was the feedback like later? Did you have to go through, like, did people come up and say, don't talk bad about our government? Because everybody is really up in arms about that. Was there anything like that? What was the general feedback like once you had published the book?
Yeah, so as in all cases with insurgencies and conflicts, there's a very strong political element to it, and but surprisingly, the feedbacks were very positive. But there was one feedback which really got to me. There was one guy who said, these are very sensitive political issues, and young writers like you shouldn't be talking about this. And I was being accused of kind of romanticizing it, and things like that. You didn't even you weren't there when it happened, so I don't think you have the right to write something like this, was what he said. But I think because especially in the case of Mizo literature, our written literature is very young as compared to our oral tradition. So that is why we don't have many historical records which talk about the insurgency. So many, the present generation, there are many, especially the young age groups, who are very unaware of the insurgency. And almost all the written accounts that we have about the insurgency are very political. It's about who's responsible, it's very biased, politically biased. So I wanted to create a narrative which is neutral and free, which talks about the real experience of the innocent children. So I think majority of the readers understood that, and I tried my best to leave the political aspects aside and try to remain politically neutral. So I didn't really get much, political comments regarding that.
Right. This one question that I wanted to come to is actually how to stay neutral, and I think we'll go to Kripa for that. How do we stay neutral when we are talking about, topics which get, which bring out so many emotions? So, how do you stay neutral when you're illustrating?
I cannot stay neutral.
Yes, I mean, do you stay neutral or do you not?
I cannot stay neutral only because the medium that I use is, my work is art, and art is about voicing your opinion in the strongest possible way, and that's what I do. I don't think if I become neutral, then then I would be I don't think I would be happy with myself, and the work would not it would not do justice. I wouldn't be doing justice to the book, and I wouldn't be speaking the truth to children. But yet at the same time, I do not enforce my opinion through my art. The art that I do is my opinion, but it's also open-ended for children to interpret and take what they want from it, and also it asks questions, and they are allowed to form their own opinion based on what they see.
I think right after this question, this answer, I want to get into, what is your message or to the guardians and the parents and the teachers who are really reluctant to, there are, gatekeepers who are really reluctant to expose children to, these heavy topics, and they don't think that children have the capacity to understand such complexities. I remember in Jamlo Walks, one thing that really struck me was when Tara enters the room, her mom shuts off the laptop, and she's like, do you want to eat something, or just changes the topic. A lot of parents don't want their kids to get politicized. They don't want politics to enter their lives so quick, so early in their life. They want, there is this romanticizing of, childhood innocence. They don't want heavy duty topics too. So, what is your message to, parents and guardians regarding that, Samina?
Arpita, I'll just tell you that, the thing is about the political aspect also, that I feel that, parents who keep away children from politics are also not the ones who are immediately affected by politics. There are children who are immediately affected by politics, and our books are for all kinds of children, for every kind of child. So children whose reality is politics, they do not respond, their parents do not respond in this fashion, and the parents who respond in this manner are in protected bubbles themselves.
Yeah, because I think when if you go to, bookshops or book fairs, and when we have our book fairs, a lot of parents come to us and they ask, what are the books what books should we buy for our child who's, this age group, but not certain themes. And there are reading groups where you go, and there are parents who are asking for recommendations. Can you tell me if this is okay for my 6-year-old, if this is okay for my 7-year-old? And I see a lot of editors and a lot of publishers typing in, just let them read, just let them pick up whatever book they
Yeah.
want to pick up. So this is where I'm coming from. So I will ask, Samina, what do you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of what Kripa has said. I don't think that there can be any neutrality. I don't think even the news is neutral. And this is something that I think we need to kind of actually accept. Everybody needs to recognize that. So, as parents, I can understand that parent, Tara's mother, who wants to protect. I understand that impulse, but we need to be reflective. We need to in the end it is about living a life that we examine, right? So if we are privileged enough to make that choice that we can protect our child from what we see as politics too soon, does that mean that every child in the world has that privilege? And do we ask ourselves that question? So I am not saying that there has to be one standard that we can apply. I think these are personal choices, and parents have that right and should have that right to make that choice. It is not for me to say to all parents that, this is the way that you must bring up your child. But I would urge them to ask themselves that question, that, is my context the only context? And if I want to protect my child from this, why is it? What is it that I'm protecting my child from? And again, I don't think there is one answer to this. And the other thing which I would like to say is that one has to also take cues from children. That we have to listen and observe our children and the children that we are around as parents, as caregivers, as teachers, because there may be sometimes a child who doesn't actually voice something but is experiencing something and would benefit from talking about it. So I don't think that we can have a one size fits all rule, but for parents I think what I would urge is you have to be reflective in your role as parents, but also in your role as just living in the world, no?
Yeah,
And
I
it is
think
that you can bring to your engagement with your child.
Yeah, I think we see this very starkly in Hannah's book, because I love how it's an only male family setup, which we don't see a lot in literature, and how the father is so open, when it comes to his son expressing emotions. I think that was a very sweet point when his best friend dies, and he's like, let it all out. And even the grandfather is always telling stories, and he's talking about bombs and how they didn't want to go to for the World War, because they were there was a love of his life and he wanted to be with her. So I think there are a lot of these things that kind of make When Blackbirds Fly a very important book in when it comes to talking about parents and having a very frank conversation with their children. So Hannah, do you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, I think I very much agree with what Samina said earlier about the fact that children must remember we have to expose them to certain realities, and I think getting in touch with violent histories like this tend to play a very important role in, as I've said before, bridging the generational gap. For instance, it's because I grew up with my mother's stories about the insurgency that I understand why my grandmother is triggered by the smell of smoke that's coming from wood. And it's because I grew up with these insurgency stories that I understand why my 94-year-old neighbor has a certain fear of army men. So I think even children need to understand understand what their parents and their grandparents have gone through in order to, coexist with them peacefully, in order to understand what they have gone through and, understand their experiences. I think it's very important to expose children to these kind of issues and incidents which have happened in the past.
So how does one encourage, parents and guardians to have conversations with children is one thing that I want to talk about. And what I did like about Wounds was that, Kripa, you have given a space for children to kind of let out their creativity. There's a space where they can where they can draw and they can write. Why, like, was that intentional? Was having that space intentional for them to read and then kind of have a moment where they kind of, just let it all out?
Yeah, I think all Art First books are in the same format of encouraging interactivity with these books. And there is at the back of every, this particular book belongs to a series of biographies of different artists. And, so once you've explored the works of the artist, the book then delves into the artworks of the artist. And then the last segment is where the children create. So the idea of a book like this is a read. It's not a. I would not say it's a read alone book where the child can first pick up the. And I don't think children naturally tend to go to a bookstore and pick up a book like this. It is the parent who has to intervene and who helps the child pick out a book like this, because it is a guardian or a parent who has to spend time with the child with a book like this. It was the idea of a book, this book. So keeping that in mind, even the end pages explain how one can really talk about art to children. Art needs to be spoken about to children is the idea of this book. And then further take the learnings of this book beyond the book itself, encouraging children to visit art galleries. Because as of now, our art galleries are elite spaces, only visited by a certain class of people, certain category of people, and also only by adults. Whereas the idea of these books are to encourage parents to take children along with them to art galleries.
Yeah, I think it's also true for Jamno Walks, because I think in the end we see that the non-fiction note that talks about the real incident that happened and that kind of influenced the story. So I think that will also kind of encourage. I thought it was a space where, once you're done with the story and then you have the moment to absorb what has happened, then you see it's actually, from real life, from a real life incident. So, is there any particular way, Samina, you think how to encourage talking to children about difficult topics? Like, is there I know there's no one size fits all sort of a thing, but when do you start talking? Because I know, the pandemic affected too many people, too many children. We have pandemic babies who didn't like who didn't have the access to a park for at least 2 years, and then suddenly they are like, oh my God, what is happening? So, what is the right age to kind of at least give them hints of, what and how to talk?
So I think, again, I'd say that we have to take the cue from the child. That is the most critical thing. So, I think there are all kinds of books, and I believe very strongly that children should have the right to choose what they want to read and engage with. But I think that there are also books that are mediated, with, and I don't think that necessarily is indoctrination. mediation for a grown up, for an adult to be sitting together with the child and reading something because the grown up has chosen that is not necessarily indoctrination. It is also a sharing, which is what we would do even between adults, right? So I think there are all kinds of books, and mediation is necessary for certain books. I think Jamlo is a book that needs conversation. And like I said earlier as well, I think it needs a space to be held, that maybe that conversation cannot happen immediately. Maybe that note cannot be read right after the story finishes, So you need to keep that space for coming back to it, maybe the next day or maybe the next week, or when there is a cue that you get from the child. The child makes a connection with something, because that is how, even when we as adults, we watch a film and we come away, we're not like a really good film. Sometimes it stays with us, and there's something in the middle of the night which strikes you, isn't it? And we are making meaning making meaning is a process rather than that, it happens in this very finite kind of way. So I would say that is the thing that we need to kind of think about and make space for, that we allow for that meaning making to continue. It's a process, and we don't think like, okay, so we are done with it and now let's move on to the next.
Right.
This is it is if we believe that art has a place in life, then it's a continuous and ongoing thing.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that open. It's like an open conversation. You have to think of it like a friendship also, that keeps growing, in different ways, and keep it alive. Yeah.
Right. I think this is also true for wounds actually, because I remember reading and learning about Shomnath Orr's works when we were doing art history, and at that time we were just going through, okay, we have to just read this topic, that topic, and then it suddenly, I think, hit me, I think when I was in college, that there is a preoccupation with the bodies that he kind of that he has painted. So there's hollowed out spaces, you see the ribs. So it's a gradual process that comes to you, the understanding comes to you, like realization pretty late, like, okay, this is what was kind of, haunting him for a long time. So I totally get what, Samira, you're trying to say, like you can't just throw away one book, because once, like after a while, then you pick it up a few years later, there are more layers that kind of gets, they get added.
Yeah.
Uh,
I would say, sorry to jump in back in, but I would say the thing that I think for us as adults that we need to remember is that children are not that different from us, in that sense. So why do we imagine that, there's a different way in which we have to engage with them? That, of course, that they are children is something we have to remember, but they are as different because of their context, in the way that different adults are different. And in that same way, we as adults grow with every experience, and we learn. We are constantly learning. It's not like there's some threshold and now we know everything. Children, like babies, are learning. No, from day one they are learning. So I think we have to remember that they are not so different from us. So the way we talk to them, the way that we engage with them, we have to like do it the way that we would like others to engage with us.
understanding of concepts are much advanced. Like, people are scared to talk about death, with kids, but then you realize that they know what is happening. Like in Hannah's book, I think at the end, the protagonist like realizes that, the loss of innocence has already happened. I mean, they are already, he's thinking at a very different level right now. So, uh, yeah, totally, I agree with you, Samina, there. One other question that I would want to ask is that, the children's, the publishing landscape has changed drastically in the last few years, and we see more diverse books in the market. Why do you think that has happened? Do you think there's any particular reason that a lot of different, diverse books out there. Hannah, do you want to take that?
I think it's I don't have like the correct answer for that, but I think it's because we have gradually come to realize that even as Samina has said, like children are very much like adults in many ways, and they understand things which we thought they do not understand. And I think the need for bringing out more serious themes for children's literature and more diverse themes for children's reading has become a very important part of the reading community. And I think it's just it's something which is brought about by a deeper understanding of children's psychology. And as our world becomes more complex and complicated, I think the need to expose children to these kind of issues is being we're starting to be aware of these kind of things. I think that's the reason.
Right. Samina, do you want to talk about this? Because I know you've also written Nida Finds a Way, which
Yeah.
is about the Shine Bagh protests. And, lately there have been, and it's the need of the hour, I feel, talking about different topics, talking about body positivity, about identities, exploring sexuality. And there is suddenly, we see a lot of books, thankfully, in the market, available to children. So why do you think like there has been this sudden
Hmm.
trend?
So, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm really qualified to answer this, but I'll tell you what I think. I think that, children are part of the world, and in some ways, the market has recognized that, no, before. And the market wants to be able to tap into whichever groups that, profit can be generated from. So that has existed. But I think there are always there are many forces which are acting in a time which may not always be cohesive. And so while the market may have understood this about sort of like that this is a group that we can kind of create products for and generate profit, there are people, there are scholars and activists and artists and writers and environmentalists and poets who are also engaging with the world and putting out. I mean, this is knowledge is being created in so many multiple ways, and I think it is a coming together of many of those things. So there are voices which recognize that yes, we must talk to our children about these things because children are part of the world, and they deserve to have a space in which they can express, where they can engage, where they can be part of the bigger conversations. And then there is at the same time there's the market which thinks, okay, so let's make these books and maybe we can also make profit out of that. So I think maybe it's a coming together of many of these things, not necessarily in a very cohesive and thought out way, which sort of allows for some of these. And then there are the brave people who take the chance, who will experiment. So in fact, I was in an interview, one of the questions I was asked was that what gave me the confidence to write in Nida about the Shine Bagh protest. And that question, it made me think that actually it wasn't, I never thought that, oh, do I have the confidence to write about this? That was not a question for me. But I guess as somebody who lives in the world and who saw all of that happening, it was the people who were out there who gave me that confidence. No, so I'm not alone. I know that there are always others. No, there were many people at Shaheen Bagh, and then there were many Shaheen Baghs across India. And so we know that there are always more people like us. No, we are not while we are unique, but we are also not unique in that sense. No. Yeah. So I think it comes from that it's important to recognize that there are many people's work which allows for this kind of moment where we suddenly feel that there's a lot of work which is being put out. Yeah.
And I want to add to this. I quite like what Hannah highlighted about this person who came up to her and told her that who is she to write about an issue which happened so many years ago, when she was not a first person witness to the incident, or she's not one of the suffrages. So I really want to add to that. I want to comment on that because there is this question that has come up today. Who is somebody to write about another community? Who am I to write about the tribal community? Who is a white person to write about a black community, and so on and so forth. And I think that is one of the things that we are. This is one of the challenges that we are trying to overcome today. In our literature world, that I think we need to have multiple narratives, multiple perspectives by many voices, by many people. Because all these years we have believed that there is only one truth, but that isn't so. There are multiple truths, and truths exist on different dimensions, and that revelation comes to us only when we read different perspectives. When a Ramayana is written in the perspective of Sita, when a Ramayana is written in the perspective of Hanuman, when it's written in some other voice, we exist in multiple times, and we understand that time is not linear, and like Samina mentioned, that we sort of cohesively come to a greater understanding and of our world, and so I think it is very important, and I'm happy that this diversity is now, the plurality is now sort of spreading out, and it's widening our horizons.
Yeah. Okay, the last question, because I think we're running out of time now. Final question would be how to stay hopeful and how to keep the hope alive when you're talking about such dark topics. I will start with like, how do we let kids know that their dreams are still relevant and one day, it's going to be okay? So, what do we do? Like, how do we keep that alive?
They give me hope. I go to them for hope.
I think that when we write for children, this is something that we really, I certainly feel we have to hold on to. And, many children's writers will speak about this. So for me, that was also very important in writing Jamlo. Like I said, it's not the real Jamlo. I didn't know the real Jamlo. This is a Jamlo of my mind, from my mind. But in that journey, as I imagined it, even though she didn't make it back home, I hope that there are these little moments where one is able to hold on to that hope, and that is so when she holds the chili out to try to connect with the bird, or when the dhabewala gives her a laddu. For me, those are important kind of moments in the story. And that's because also that while we have to remember that, such terrible things happened in the pandemic to so many people, but it is also, that people did come together, and people have, even in the most challenging circumstances, continued to, come together. They set up langars, and they braved curfew to go out and distribute medicines and later oxygen and all of those things. There have been people who continue, like I feel even those who continue to engage with just the creation of beauty and engaging with nature and trying to hold on to, even though the planet seems to be like we're on the verge of some kind of, big collapse, but there are people who continue to do that kind of work. And I feel that is also humanity, there's the ugly face of humanity, which we saw, but there's also this side of it. And that's why I think that for us who work with children's literature, I think this is something that becomes really important, because we are, in a sense, children are carrying that burden of the future. No, there's no escaping that. We have to sort of we can't pretend that we aren't looking towards them to kind of like fix everything that we broke. But what we even as we do that, we have to at least be there present as allies. And how do we then show that alliance? We have to show that alliance by always holding on to that possibility, because there is always possibility, at least in the present, in the way we live our lives, with what kind of grace and what kind of kindness can we live our lives. Yeah.
I think one of the things which I also found hopeful in Wounds was that space of creativity. That to me spoke a lot because, it gives the child a kind of, space, a safe space to express themselves. And that to me, like expressing their emotions through art was quite hopeful. Uh, yeah. So I think that was really important, because there's also a takeaway that you kind of once you're done reading, then you kind of go through that. Hannah, do you want to talk about hope and looking forward to dreams, in your book?
Yeah, I think in terms of hope, I think it's all about perspective, how we, look at history, especially when reading historical fiction about trauma and violence for children, like my book. From one perspective, it can be read as a story about, the hunger for power, the brutality of human beings, the killing and the bloodshed. But I think beyond the hard historical fact and the statistics and the historical facts, I think there is a story of a beautiful story of survival, how their grandparents and their parents have made it through those dark times. And I think any story of trauma and violence, in any story of trauma and violence, there is also stories of survival and hopefulness, which children can find in these kind of books.
Yeah, I think, and that is so much needed because I was just like, a weekend of reading three of your books. I was just feeling, what do I, where do you look, when you're reading such dark, topics. But then once you keep on rereading them and you keep on thinking about them, there are these, aspects that you find which are so hopeful. I think we'll end on that note, and I really want to thank all of you for taking out the time to talk to me and about these, talking about difficult things, when it comes to children. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Arpita.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure talking to all of you and Arpita.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating in our literary festival. Please don't forget to join us this weekend, November 12th and 13th, at the Kalem Gallery in New York City for our in-person literary festival. Thank you. As the Literary Festival Director for IAAC, I would like to thank you for joining our award-winning authors. IAAC is a not-for-profit, a 501c not-for-profit located in New York City. The program that you just watched was made possible by the generous donation of viewers like yourself. Your donation enables us to support artists and sustain programs that you enjoy. Please visit our website, iaac.us, to make a donation, and here you will also find information on your membership benefits. On behalf of the board and team at IAAC, I would like to thank you for your support and look forward to seeing you at our next